Now, when we get to the colder months in our vegetable gardens, particularly as we approach winter, the growing productivity for our flowers and our vegetables significantly reduces. And you might think it's a great time to put your feet up, have a cup of tea and enjoy the rest and get ready for the following spring. But actually, there's lots of things that can be done in November and December in the colder months to prepare your garden for the following growing season. And in this video, I'm going to share with you 7 jobs that you should be doing in your flower or vegetable garden in November or December. And if you do carry out these jobs, it'll put you in a fantastic position to give you a really good start for the next growing season. Now, when we grow our vegetables, we put a lot of time and effort in growing them and making sure that they're as healthy as possible. And when we get to November and December and the temperature starts to drop and it starts to get frosty, that's not going to be good for a lot of vegetables. So the first job that you should be doing in November and December is having a look around your garden and having a look what vegetables are still there. Now, clearly some vegetables will tolerate frost. So if you've got leeks, certain types of cabbage and even winter varieties of things like lettuce and other vegetables, they should be fine with a little bit of protection in the frost. Some vegetables won't. Now, if we take this raised bed behind me, you can see that I've still got lots of lovely celery and there's also some cabbage at the back. That can be harvested. Now, celery will tolerate some cold temperatures, but if I leave it too long, a lot of it won't be any good. So I'm going to harvest as much of this as possible today. I'll also be harvesting the cabbage. I've also got some winter lettuce that I'll be harvesting and the last few of my carrots and 1 or 2 odd beetroots. And there's 1 or 2 other things around my garden that I'll still be harvesting. But this is a good time now to make sure you don't waste all that time and effort you've made in growing your vegetables by letting them die through the cold and frosty weather. So the first job in November and December is to go around your garden and check if you've got any vegetables that can be harvested and save you wasting them. And I guarantee that you'll be surprised by the amount of vegetables that you'll harvest in November. I'm always surprised by how much I collect as I look around my garden and find those vegetables that I thought had finished. So don't waste all that time and effort you've made in the earlier growing season and harvest and store all those lovely vegetables that you've grown. The next thing to do is go around your flower and vegetable beds and remove any dead or discarded vegetables and leaves. And one of the main reasons that you'll clear all of your dead and decaying vegetables and flowers is that they can harbour pests and diseases that can overwinter and can cause a problem during the spring when you start to plant your new plants. So just by removing any dead leaves or plants or anything that is decaying and putting them on your compost heap will give your planting beds a bit of recovery time over the winter and early spring period, and also help to make the growing beds as healthy as possible for the next growing season. Now, a fantastic free resource that becomes available in late fall or early winter is leaves. All of the deciduous trees will start to shed their leaves, and these really are gardener's gold, and you should collect as many of these as possible. Now, some of these are going to go straight onto my compost heap because leaves are a really good source of carbon, and you need a mix of carbon and nitrogen, which is all the other green things that you put on your compost heap, in order to help the decomposition process. So collect as many leaves as you can. I'll also be making as much leaf mould as I can by collecting these leaves and putting them in bags, and there are videos on my channel which show you how to make compost and how to make leaf mould, and I will put links to some of those videos in the video description below, and you'll see how easy it is. But while you have got the opportunity in November and early December, make sure you collect as many leaves as you possibly can. Now, another really important job for us to do in November and December is to give our growing beds some real care and attention. Now, these growing beds all around our gardens have been working really hard over the spring and summer with all of those lovely flowers or vegetables that you've been growing. And those flowers and vegetables have been taking nutrients out of the soil and out of the ground in order to grow. So now it's time in November and December to give our growing beds something back. And there's a number of things we can do to help put nutrients back into our growing beds in preparation for the next growing season. And one of the things we can do is put a layer of multi-purpose compost all over the surface on top of our growing beds, just 1 or 2 inches, and let that settle. Or alternatively, we could put some manure over the top of the surfaces of our growing beds. This is a fantastic time of year to do this, because if you do that with manure or compost, all of that frost and that rain and sometimes snow will help break down the compost and the manure that you would have put on your beds and help to permeate those nutrients into the growing medium below. So when you come to plant your new vegetables or flowers into these flowering beds, there's going to be some lovely nutrients waiting for them, and that's going to give your vegetables and flowers a real boost in the spring. And one alternative, which is becoming much more common now as an alternative to manure or to compost, is to use something called green manure. That's where you'll get certain types of crops that you'll plant seeds that will grow over the winter period, and then in spring you'll just dig them into the ground and they will have the nutrients already in them. Now, the next suggestion for a job that you might think about doing in your garden in November or December is a little bit controversial, because I know that some gardeners do it and some don't, and that is to cover your beds over the winter period. Now, I assume that people that do this, where they might use something like a sheet rolled plastic or carpets or some other type of covering, maybe even cardboard, the principle behind that will be that it will suppress weeds. And then when you come to the growing season, you just take off your covering and then you'll have your nice lovely ground underneath ready to start planting in. And I'm not disagreeing that there is some value in that, but I choose not to cover my growing beds. I don't mind, as you can see behind me here, a few surface weeds growing, because even if I was to cover over my beds during the winter period and take the covering off in spring, I've still got work to do in preparing the compost or the soil ready for the new crops. So to have a few surface weeds is not really a problem. Another thing that happens by covering your growing beds over the winter period is it does make the ground underneath slightly more humid, and that does potentially create an environment for fungal diseases. You've also got the issue of potential maintenance as well, because if you do cover your growing beds, then you've got to weigh the covering down with something, and if you have heavy winds or harsh weather, then that's just going to blow your covering off and you've got to continually come back and check it and keep covering it over. Now, I personally choose not to cover my growing beds over the winter period. We'll give them a covering of manure or compost and then just leave them and let them be exposed to the winter weather, and then come springtime take out any surface weeds that are there and dig it all in. But I do appreciate that is a personal choice. I'm not criticising anybody that decides to do that. I just choose not to do that myself. Something else you need to be mindful of at this time of year in November, December, for those vegetables or flowers that you still have growing outside, you might need to give them an extra level of protection. So any tender plants, flowers or vegetables that you have growing through that period, at the point where a frost is predicted, or that you know the temperature is going to be sub-zero for a certain amount of time, it might be necessary for you to provide something like a layer of fleece over the top. Behind me here I have my winter greens. So I'm growing these in the pots that I initially grew my potatoes in, and in here I have some Chinese cabbage, some mizuna, some spinach, some pak choi, and all of the varieties have been selected to tolerate cold temperatures. But in the really harshest temperatures of winter, I will be providing a level of fleece just over the top, just to make sure they've got that extra level of insulation to help give them that level of protection that they need. Alternatively, you might have an indoor growing space such as a greenhouse or a polytunnel or a cold frame that could provide that protection also. So November or December is a good time just to go around your vegetable or flower garden and just monitor which plants may need protection, just to keep an eye out for that weather forecast and give them the protection they need to help them survive. And one final really important job I'll be doing in November and December is spending a bit of time in here in my potting shed. In here is all of my pots, my plants, my compost, and everything I need to grow. It needs a really good tidy up. I don't really give this an awful lot of care and attention during the growing season because I'm so busy outside the potting shed with dealing with the vegetables and the flowers and everything else that's going on. So November or December is a really good time for me to get in here, have a really good tidy up, and just get it organised, ready for the new growing season. I'll also look at all of my tools and clean them, sharpen them where I need to, and just make an inventory of what I need in terms of seeds and plants and other supplies for the growing season. So November or December is a fantastic time to start to organise yourself ready for the new growing season, and one of my main jobs will be to sort out my potting shed. So I think it's fair to say that November and December are crucial months to help prepare your garden ready for the winter period, and also to be proactive to do some jobs that can help you for the start of the next growing season. So there's plenty that you can do. Now clearly in November and December we're a lot less active in terms of growing vegetables and flowers. However, the preparation can make such a difference for your new growing season. It's worth considering some of the jobs that I've just covered in this video to help you get a really good head start for your growing season next year. And I hope it's given you 1 or 2 ideas. And if you've got suggestions for jobs that I haven't covered in the video that you will be doing in your garden in November or December for vegetables or for flowers, then pop them in the comments below, because it's really fantastic to share these ideas with other growers, and people who do watch the video will be able to pick up further ideas and further suggestions. I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and I do hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to subscribe to the channel for future videos on how to sow and grow fruit, vegetables and flowers, and 1 or 2 recipe ideas, don't forget to press the subscribe button. And I'll see you all on the next video.